The radio crackled in the cockpit. Multiple contacts, bearing north-northwest, high altitude. Flight Lieutenant James McClachlin lifted his eyes toward the Mediterranean sky. At first, there was nothing there. Just blue. Then the shapes appeared. Dark specks against the sun. 1, 5, 10. More. He counted carefully. 22. 22 German fighters circling high above him. And below them, alone in the sky, flew a single Spitfire Mk V. His Spitfire. No wingman. No backup. Just an aging fighter aircraft and a pilot who had already been told he should not be flying at all. Spring, 1943. The island of Malta had already survived nearly 2 years of relentless siege. German and Italian aircraft had dropped more bombs per square mile here than almost anywhere else in Europe. The harbors were filled with wrecked ships. The airfields were patchworks of craters filled with coral dust and limestone rubble. Runways were repaired faster than they could be destroyed. And still the island fought. Malta's defenders flew Spitfires. But not the famous ones. Not the sleek Mark IXs with powerful Merlin engines capable of climbing to 35,000 feet. Those aircraft were needed elsewhere. In England. In North Africa. In the theaters that mattered most to the strategists studying maps in London. Malta received what remained. The Spitfire Mk V. A fighter designed in 1940 and rushed into service in 1941. By 1943, it was already considered outdated. Its single-stage supercharger limited high-altitude performance. Its climb rate lagged behind the newest German fighters. Its speed advantage had vanished. The Air Ministry called them interim aircraft. Temporary fighters. Stopgaps until better machines arrived. But the pilots on Malta called them something simpler. They called them what we have. Because they had nothing else. The heat on Malta never stopped. By midday, the metal skin of a Spitfire could burn bare hands. Inside, the cockpit temperatures climbed past 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Pilots flew in undershirts and shorts beneath their flight gear, yet sweat still soaked through everything. Harness straps rubbed raw skin. Oxygen masks left deep red grooves across their faces. Ground crews worked mostly at night. They patched bullet holes with fabric and dope. They scavenged parts from wrecked aircraft. Fuel was rationed carefully. Ammunition even more so. Every sortie was calculated against what remained. The enemy understood Malta's importance perfectly. The island sat directly across the Axis supply routes to North Africa. Every convoy traveling from Italy toward Rommel's army had to pass within range of Malta's aircraft and submarines. As long as Malta survived, those supply lines remained vulnerable. So the Axis strategy had always been simple. Destroy the island. Bomb it until the airfields stopped functioning. Starve it until it could no longer interfere. Remove it from the equation entirely. By early 1943, the worst of the siege had lifted. Allied victories in North Africa had changed the momentum, but the skies around Malta were still dangerous. German fighters based in Sicily regularly swept across the island, testing defenses, looking for weaknesses. Every time radar detected them, Malta's outdated Spitfire Mk Vs had to scramble, not because they were ideal, but because they were all that existed. The standing doctrine was cautious. Preserve the fighter force. Avoid unnecessary engagements. Wait for reinforcements. New Spitfire Mk IXs were expected soon. Until then, survival mattered more than heroics. But doctrine assumes war behaves logically, and war rarely does. James McClachlin had always approached flying differently. Born in 1919 in India, he grew up fascinated not by the romance of flying, but by its mechanics. Lift, drag, energy, speed. The mathematics of survival at 300 miles per hour. He joined the Royal Air Force in 1938. Unlike many fighter pilots, he was quiet and methodical. He checked every strap, counted every ammunition belt, memorized the quirks of every aircraft he flew. To McClachlin, a fighter plane was not simply a weapon. It was a system, and systems required understanding. In 1941, during a mission over France, a German cannon shell tore through his cockpit. The blast shattered his left arm. Blood filled the cockpit. But McClachlin kept the aircraft steady. He crossed the English Channel and landed with one hand on the control stick. Doctors amputated the arm below the elbow. The Air Ministry grounded him immediately. Fighter pilots needed 2 hands. One for the stick, one for the throttle. Without them, combat flying was impossible. McClachlin refused to accept that. He taught himself to fly again. He designed a harness that allowed his prosthetic limb to operate the throttle. He practiced relentlessly until every movement became automatic. Eventually, the RAF allowed him to return to service, but not to priority squadrons. Instead, they sent him to Malta to fly the aircraft everyone else had already replaced. On April 6, 1943, radar detected something unusual. A large German fighter formation assembling over Sicily. Likely a sweep. The standing orders were clear. Avoid engagement. Do not risk Malta's few remaining fighters. McClachlin took off at 0800 hours on a routine patrol, climbing slowly. 5,000 feet. 10,000. 15. At 18,000 feet, he leveled off. The sky was clear. The Mediterranean stretched endlessly below. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then the radar station spoke again. Multiple contacts approaching. McClachlin looked north and saw them. 22 Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters. Modern aircraft. Fast, aggressive, and directly below them flew a single Spitfire Mk V, 22 German fighters. No bombers. No reconnaissance aircraft. Just fighters. It was a pure fighter sweep, designed for one purpose: find opposition and destroy it. The logical response was simple. Turn away. Report the contact. Let the formation pass. One Spitfire Mk V against 22 Messerschmitt Bf 109 GS was not a battle. It was arithmetic. And the arithmetic said retreat. But Flight Lieutenant James McClachlin did not turn away. He banked the Spitfire toward them. The decision was not bravado. It was calculation. The German formation was heading straight for Malta. If they reached the island unopposed, they would strafe the airfields. Parked aircraft, fuel dumps, radar stations. A single pass could destroy more fighters on the ground than days of combat in the air. McClachlin did not need to win. He only needed to interrupt them, to force them to react, to delay their mission. Every minute mattered. He turned the Spitfire toward the sun. The only advantage the Mk V still possessed. Position, surprise, speed. The Merlin engine roared as he pushed the throttle forward. The aircraft surged ahead. The German pilots saw him almost immediately. One lone Spitfire climbing toward them. Several fighters broke formation. Their instinct was simple. Swarm the attacker. Destroy the nuisance. Return to the sweep. McClachlin opened fire first. 400 yards. A long burst. Tracer rounds streaked through the sky. The lead Messerschmitt broke sharply left. The formation scattered. For a moment, instinct replaced discipline. The German pilots hesitated. They could not be certain the Spitfire was alone. He might be the forward element of a larger interception force. McClachlin climbed. The Mk V strained upward. The supercharger whining. The German fighters climbed faster, but he was not trying to outclimb them. He was trying to make them climb. Every second meant fuel burned. Time wasted. A Bf 109 dove toward him from above. McClachlin rolled the Spitfire inverted and pulled through the dive. G-forces crushed him into the seat. The German overshot. Too much speed. Too much closure. McClachlin reversed instantly. For a moment, the Messerschmitt filled his gun sight. He fired. A short burst. The German aircraft jerked sideways and broke away, trailing something behind it. Smoke or vapor. Impossible to tell. Another fighter attacked from the left. McClachlin turned directly into it. The Spitfire tightened into a brutal circle. The German pilot had two choices: collision or breakaway. He broke. McClachlin fired again as the enemy rolled out of the turn. Hits or misses didn't matter. The goal was disruption. The radio erupted with voices. Ground radar. Airfield control. They demanded his status. Ordered him to disengage. Asked if he required support. McClachlin ignored them. Inside the cockpit, the world had narrowed. Fuel gauge dropping. Ammunition counter winding down. 22 enemy fighters circling. Adjusting. Learning. He pushed the Spitfire into a dive. The aircraft accelerated. 300 knots. 350. 400. The airframe shuddered as compressibility crept into the controls. He leveled out low over the sea. The Mediterranean flashed beneath his wings. Now the Germans had to follow him down. At low altitude, the Bf 109's advantage disappeared. Supercharged engines lost efficiency. The fight flattened. McClachlin turned sharply along the water. The Spitfire's wingtips skimmed dangerously close to the waves. Behind him, the Messerschmitts followed, but cautiously. At this altitude, one mistake meant death. He led them away from Malta, further out to sea. Every minute they chased him was another minute the island's airfields remained safe. 10 minutes passed, then 15. The fuel gauge slid steadily downward. McClachlin calculated the distance back to Malta. Reserve fuel. Margin of survival. He had perhaps 5 minutes of combat fuel left. The German pilots adapted. They stopped chasing as a swarm. Instead, they coordinated attacks. High passes, low passes, trying to trap the Spitfire between them. McClachlin climbed again, directly into the sun. The glare blinded them for precious seconds. He turned inside their attacks, forcing overshoots, breaking their timing. His ammunition was almost gone now. He fired only short bursts, just enough to make them react, just enough to keep their attention. Then one Messerschmitt finally slipped behind him. McClachlin saw the flashes first. Then he heard the impacts. Heavy cannon shells slammed into the Spitfire's tail. The aircraft shuddered violently. Controls sluggish. Rudder damaged. He forced the Spitfire into a sudden vertical maneuver. Climb. Roll. Reverse. The German fighter tried to follow. At that speed, the maneuver was impossible. The Messerschmitt stalled and flicked into a spin. McClachlin didn't wait to watch. He dove east, toward Malta. Behind him, the German fighters began to peel away. One by one, they turned north toward Sicily. Their fuel was nearly gone. The sweep had failed. McClachlin leveled out at 3,000 feet. The engine coughed. Once. Twice. The fuel gauge needle rested on empty. He switched to the reserve tank. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Merlin engine caught again. 5 minutes of fuel remained. Maybe less. And Malta was finally ahead. The limestone cliffs of Malta appeared ahead, white against the deep blue of the Mediterranean. McClachlin lowered the landing gear. The hydraulic system groaned. One wheel locked. The other hesitated. He cycled the lever again. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the second wheel snapped into place. Both locked. He lined up with the runway. The damaged rudder forced constant correction. The Spitfire yawed left, then right. The aircraft unstable after the cannon hits to the tail. He held it steady. The runway rushed toward him. The Spitfire touched down hard. The tires screamed against limestone. The tail wheel bounced once. Twice. The aircraft slewed sideways, but stayed on the center line. Then the Merlin engine coughed. Once. Twice. And died. The Spitfire rolled to a stop. Ground crews were already running toward him. They climbed onto the wings and began counting the damage. 17 cannon shell hits. Torn fabric in the tail. Fuel tanks punctured. Control surfaces bent. The aircraft had barely survived the flight back. McClachlin climbed out quietly. His flight suit was soaked with sweat. The prosthetic harness on his left arm had rubbed raw against the socket during the fight. He said nothing. He simply picked up his logbook and walked toward the debriefing hut. Inside, the intelligence officer asked the obvious question. How many did you get? McClachlin shrugged. One confirmed. Maybe two. He wasn't certain. That wasn't the mission. The officer looked confused. Then why engage 22 fighters alone? McClachlin answered simply. They were heading for the airfield. Someone had to turn them around. The report spread quickly through RAF command. 1 Spitfire Mk V, 22 German fighters. 17 minutes of combat. The German sweep aborted. Malta's airfields untouched. McClachlin had not defeated the enemy formation. He had denied it its objective. And that, strategically, mattered far more. The Spitfire Mk V continued flying over Malta for months afterward. Not because it was superior, but because the pilots flying it understood something important. Aircraft specifications did not determine victory. People did. James McClachlin flew dozens more missions over the Mediterranean. In July 1943, during a routine ferry flight, his engine failed over the Irish Sea. He attempted a forced landing. The aircraft crashed. He was 24 years old. Today, the skies above Malta are quiet. The cliffs still glow white in the Mediterranean sun. The airfields have become museums. Spitfires rest behind glass. But the lesson remains. Sometimes victory does not belong to the strongest aircraft. Sometimes it belongs to the pilot who understands exactly how to use the one he has.